Welcome to our third edition of Rachel and Ralph's Reality Check, where we give you the inside scoop on politics and nobody pays us to say what we're saying. And since he is a 35-plus-year veteran of Washington, Ralph, who is the Washington Insider contributor to Newsmax, will give you the skinny. And I have my own history of writing for Townhall for years, and I also will tell you what goes behind the scenes, having worked for multiple politicians. So today we are going to discuss three things. We're going to, first of all, talk about what's going on in Arizona with the ballot audit and the out-of-control Democrat Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, who's trying to stop it. Then we're going to talk about a column that Ralph wrote on how Biden can bring people together on immigration, if that's possible, Ralph. And then finally, for our blue collar segment, we're going to discuss how the government is getting rid of the $300 per week pandemic unemployment benefit. So let's start out with what's going on in Arizona. I don't know how much you know about it, Ralph, being a DC person, but basically here in Arizona, we are ground zero, just like Georgia right now, for, discovering what happened in the presidential election and, whether there really was voter fraud or not. And what is really bothering me is this Arizona Democrat Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, is doing everything she can to stop the ballot audit. And the woman is completely crooked, completely corrupt. I've exposed it in my latest article. And, the one thing that really sticks out to me and makes me furious, she keeps calling this conspiracy theory, is the fact that boxes of ballots that are being examined right now have different numbers of ballots in them than the pink sheet included with them. The pink sheet usually says there's more ballots. One example said there was a pink sheet that said there were 35 ballots. And, there were 35 ballots missing that really weren't even in there. So what say you, Ralph?
Well, I say that there's no question that there are ballot irregularities. There have been back since the days of George Washington, who used to give away free beer to buy votes with. So this is a noble American tradition. The real question is it occurring on a scale sufficiently to have changed the outcome of the election? And let me be really clear about this. I don't share your passionate views about the corruption of certain elected officials. I do have a place in Phoenix and I spend some time there, but I don't have any opinions about that myself. That said, there is no way of changing the outcome of an election at this point, even if it turns out
we're not even saying that. I never said we're trying to change the outcome.
The important thing is ballot integrity going forward. And let me just echo what Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson of North Carolina said. He's an African American and a Republican, and the first African American Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, and the favorite to become the governor in the election coming up in 2 years. And he made a very moving statement before the Congress within sometime last month, or maybe it was early this month, but I think it was in May. He said, "Stop patronizing us African Americans. You people who are pretending to protect us are acting like we are too incompetent to bring in a government issued photo ID, whether it's a driver's license or whether it is one of those photo IDs for people who don't have a driver's license, in order to register to vote." So those on the left, progressives, who claim to be protecting us are actually patronizing us. And we are perfectly capable of registering to vote with a requirement that we present a photo ID. This is Mark Robinson's statement went viral. It was a statement of great dignity. He comes from a civil rights tradition. He is nobody's patsy. And so for the left that wants to make the efforts on the part of the Republicans, which personally I think are probably a little overblown, but for them to equate that with Jim Crow, Mark Robinson says his parents were subject to lynching, and that did not intimidate them from demanding their civil rights. And to equate demanding a photo ID to register to vote with the Jim Crow laws is just, it's wrong and it's patronizing. And I really think that Mark Robinson is doing America a great service by standing up for the integrity of the African Americans and the minorities who are perfectly capable of registering to vote, even with these very mild increases in ballot security that the Republicans are pushing, both in many countries, in many states, like Arizona and like Georgia and many other states. So
Well,
that's my position, Rachel. I'm sticking to it.
I came up with a theory over this past week about why the Democrats keep accusing us of racism so much with every policy. My theory is because the Republican Party is the party of Christians, and Christians have a lot of rules and a lot of no's and a lot of you can't do that, you can't do this. I think they thought it would be really easy to make it look like, oh, well, Christians aren't for mixing with other races, and Christians aren't for, looking out for, that minority, or because, they're, we don't know about them. They're not like us. You know what I mean? Like, they made it seem like it was just an easy jump to get from thou shalt not steal to, thou shalt not hang out with those minorities who are foreign to us, blah, 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 blah. It was brilliant. I think they actually got traction by using that hook. And so we've spent, years trying to push back and say, sorry, there's nothing racist in the Bible. But it was a brilliant maneuver. And until people start standing up to these, lies from the left and these blatant lies, and I think it's going to come from Black conservatives. I really do. I see people like Candace Owens who are just, they're just so incredibly outspoken, and they're all over the place, and you can't ignore them anymore. It's not just a handful of Black Republicans anymore. They're all over.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, Rachel. But let me just say, as a Jewish fan of Christianity, which is our baby, Judaism was the startup, and Christianity, particularly Catholicism, is the IPO. And you've taken our Lord, our God, and our commandments and exported it to billions of people. We were a tiny little millions of people, and you've taken essentially our religion and exported it to 1,000 times as many people as we were capable of doing that. So, atta girl, I like that. And to take it even a little further, there is no question in my mind that Judeo-Christianity, but particularly Christianity, is right in the crosshairs of the left. The left is absolutely avid to destroy Orthodox religion because it stands in their way of replacing the classical culture that America was founded on, which is classical liberal, and by liberal, I modify that by classical to mean there are certain laws that are endowed by God or nature's God that even the state can't take away. And since the left wants an all-powerful state, that is an obstacle to them. Classical liberal republicanism, small r, meaning that people elect leaders and delegate to them the power to govern, subject to our recalling them, our diselecting them if they're not carrying out the popular will. Judeo-Christian capitalism. That is the culture that America was founded in, and that is the culture that the left is determined to tear down. I'm a little less concerned with the left's animus than with the right's cluelessness, because this is not a culture war. This is a cultural revolution a la Mao Zedong. And until we recognize that and create a cultural counter-revolution pushing for not just defend, but to advance that classical liberal Republican Judeo-Christian capitalist culture that has created America as the envy of the world, then until we know what the fight is all about, the left is going to continue winning. So I'm cheering you on because you are getting our team, the conservatives, woke to the real nature of what this fight is all about.
Well, you bring up a good point that this is to the level of being as huge of a revolution as Mao Zedong, but the problem is there's little violence. I mean, other than a little Antifa and Black Lives Matter violence, they're coming in so stealthily that people aren't waking up and they aren't seeing how huge it is and how things are drastically changing. Now, I will give it my lefty friend credit. He constantly is laughing at us and ridiculing us and saying, you guys are all dinosaurs. You don't even realize that the culture just completely excludes you and nobody cares about you anymore. So they know, the left knows what they've done. But everyone on the right, we're just so defensive. I get attacked on Facebook by, one of my political friends all the time for saying, you shouldn't use the left's tactics against them. You shouldn't try to go on the offensive. We shouldn't do that. And really, if we don't do that, we are never going to be able to push back. And I know you, Ralph, more than anyone with your, opinions about Saul Alinsky's tactics and how we should use them. We have to. And we just disagree about the level of them because there's things he does that I don't think we should do.
Okay, well, let me just tell you, Rachel, you are, aside from the fact that you don't believe that we should use the most effective political tactics of community organizing, that the anti-big government, anti-communist, anti-socialist, pro-justice Saul Alinsky advocated, and who was picked up as an icon by the left, even though he was a libertarian through and through, okay? But
he advocated for a lot of government intervention.
No, he did not. And in fact, let's do another show about
Why
that.
do you think he was protesting? He wanted government to change the rules.
No, he was protesting the government. He was teaching citizens to use, he was Tea Party before there was Tea Party. He was teaching citizens to use their citizen power to fight corruption in government, particularly racial discrimination, to fight racial discrimination, which was fostered by the government and propounded by corporations. And he carried concealed because he was under threat from the KKK for his fight against racial discrimination, but he was not for big government. He is on record by word and by deed as hating big government, hating social workers, and hating the corruption that inevitably comes with big government. But can we put St. Saul aside for just a minute and say, until Ronald Reagan, in whose White House I worked as a deputy general counsel, the conventional wisdom was that communism, particularly the USSR, was unstoppable. All we could do was contain it and slow its spread. Ronald Reagan came along and said, my philosophy is we win, they lose. And when he got elected, the only thing that was interesting to him, his entire mission, was to win the Cold War and to beat communism by confronting them, which he did in places like Grenada and other and Afghanistan. He went after them where he could beat them, and he beat them everywhere we went. And by beating them, rather than trying to contain them, he caused the dissolution of the USSR. He caused the Soviet Union to dissolve. So I'm saying that there is compelling evidence that your position that we need to go on offense against the left rather than trying to contain it is absolutely right. And that is Ronald Reagan's success in winning the Cold War. We did it internationally. We can do it now here nationally on the home front. There is no, as somebody far wittier than me, whose name is now escaping me, said, there are more Marxists in American academia than there are in the rest of the world combined, including North Korea and Cuba. So it's time we went on offense, because our ethos, the Judeo-Christian, capitalist, classical liberal, small r Republican ethos, has been the most benevolent force in the world, both for human dignity, human liberty, and human prosperity. And we should stop being defensive about it. And we should say, everywhere you guys have gone, you've poisoned the environment, you've stripped people of their rights, and you've immiserated people in poverty, versus us, where we have created what Thomas Jefferson called the empire of liberty all around the world. And we should not only be proud of that, we should be promoting that unflinchingly, like you do in your town hall column.
And I'd like to point out, as everyone who knows me knows, my idol was the late William F. Buckley Jr. And he is one of the politest people, in politics to live, over the last, century. And so when I am advocating for we need to go on the aggressive against the left, I'm not saying we need to use profanity at them. I'm not saying we need to, talk about them being a pedophile. No, that's not polite. That's not, the proper way you should debate. I'm saying we should be very polite, but we should not just sit and be wusses and let them always, start the dialogue, control the dialogue, frame the dialogue, because that's what we've let them do for years, and they're still doing it. And I'm sick and tired of just sitting back and being in the point where I am defending radical people in our party who say crazy things. No, I'm not going to sit back and defend radical people in our party who say crazy things. I'm going to go on the offensive, and I'm going to bring the debate.
Wait 1 minute. I expect you to defend me because I'm a radical person in the party who says crazy things. You don't have to defend Marjorie MTG, the notorious MTG. I'm okay with that. Okay, but I am counting on you to defend me when my back is up against the wall and I'm fighting the bad guys. Okay, your turn is over. You've used up your 10 minutes of fame for the night, Rachel.
You don't ever say anything that's too hard to defend, so it's okay.
Okay, good. I'm glad it brought you around to my bipartisan immigration reform to build a path to citizenship to the 12 million people who were caught by the dirty deal under Simpson-Mazzoli back in 1986, and to bring in millions and millions of high quality, high character, productive people into the United States to help make the United States, to help keep the United States great. So I'm glad we're here. Shake. I'm glad you told me this.
I am not shaking now that we're going into this bipartisan immigration underneath Biden, because I don't think it's bipartisan at all. I think it's radical. I don't think he's a consensus maker. I think he throws Republicans a tiny small bones. Oh, I'm not gonna lower the corporate tax rate, but I'm gonna add a minimum brand new corporate tax rate. That is not bipartisan. So far, Republicans aren't even going for it. I mean, the guy is a radical who just pretends a compromise. And if you've looked through his immigration platform, which he wants, and I just read it, the New York Times had something about it a couple weeks ago. It is insane. He wants a pathway to citizenship. I mean, more H-1B visas, which take jobs away from,
They do not take jobs away from anybody.
We're going to let more people in from Central America, but not from Africa. I mean, where do you want to start dissecting this ridiculous, outrageous, bipartisan?
Wait a second. I said he has an opportunity to create a bipartisan immigration plan. I didn't say that his initial offer was bipartisan. I haven't read it, and frankly, I'm not going to read it because this is just a platform is something you stand on. Okay, Joe Biden, the serious left, the Jacobin left, the commie left. Okay, they don't trust Joe Biden at all because he has a long history of wanting to cut deals with the other side. He voted for both of Reagan's major tax cuts. He voted for for cutting of the top rate from 70 to 50%. He voted for the cutting of the top rate from 50 to 28%. Senator Joe Biden voted for both of those. He voted for very tough, much tougher than I approve of, criminalizing of things. The left does not trust Joe Biden because he loves to do deals with the other side. He has a 50-year history of doing that. When the Obama administration ended up with an impasse, they sent Joe Biden to negotiate and broker a deal with the Republicans, and he did it. And the hard left Democrats have still never forgiven him about that. He's a genial Irishman who loves to cut deals, just like Tip O'Neill before him. And so don't confuse Joe Biden with the Biden administration. Okay, he has done what I believe he needs to do in order to be effective to placate his hard left, so that he doesn't fracture his base, and so that he can move forward. He is counting on the good guys, the Joe Manchin, who just today, or maybe it was yesterday, announced that he's not voting for H1, whatever that is.
The H1B visas to.
No. He's not voting for Nancy Pelosi's HR1 election reform bill. He's not voting to repeal the filibuster. Okay, I think Joe Biden is a very clever statesman, and instead of him dying on this hill and alienating his left wing, and therefore creating a fractured base and a civil war inside the Democratic Party, he is going to advocate for some of his lunatic fringe lefties' dream, that he knows are going to die on the hill, but he doesn't have to die on the hill. By him advocating this, then what's going to happen is he's going to be able to count on your wonderful Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin and others to kill off the idiotic left-wing bills. His hands will be clean, and his left will not be able to attack him for having sold out, because he carried the torch for them, knowing that it was going to die on the hill. Thereby, he keeps his base intact, but he will not be blamed, because voters don't blame a president for legislation that doesn't get passed. On that basis, there was an effort to create a bipartisan immigration reform bill, and it pulled in six Republican senators and 35 House members, which was short of victory, but it shows that if Biden wants to, by the way, I know this because the grand master of immigration reform is a man named Charles Kamasaki, who I've known for 30 years. And he wrote the book. I recommend this to all your readers if they want to know what's really going on. He does the complete TikTok, one of the best books on how Washington really works, titled Immigration Reform, which I just reviewed in my Newsmax column this last week. Go out, buy Immigration Reform by Charles Kamasaki. And by the way, I've known Charles for a long time. I've done business with Charles for a long time. And the only bad thing I have to say about Charles Kamasaki is that he is so decent, so smart, and so humane that he threatens to give the left a good name.
Okay, well, I just have to
if
say,
Biden will follow the Kamasaki plan, there's a clear path. He's laid out the breadcrumb trail, how he can attract the additional 4 Republicans that he needs in the Senate, and the additional handful of Republicans that he needs in the House, in order to put together a good, kosher, bipartisan, Republican, Democratic. By the way, usually I hate bipartisan. It's usually a signal to me of a collusion between the left and the right to loot the taxpayer. But when Reagan's major tax cuts came through, it passed the Senate, the U.S. Senate, by 97-3, dropping the top rate from 70 to 50 and then to 28 in that particular bill, from 50 to 28, with Joe Biden voting yes. Okay, so in this case, there is an open, Charles Kamasaki has laid out how we can have an ethical, beneficial to the United States, beneficial to conservatives, bipartisan immigration reform that will give a path to citizenship. And by the way, most of the Latinos in the United States, half of whom are Mexicans and the rest of them are Central and South Americans, are to the right of most movement conservatives. They are only part of the left-wing coalition because we've been giving them the cold shoulder. If we welcome them with open arms, they will be an El Dorado for conservatives. And I can walk you through that step by step in a future show. And even you, oh skeptical Rachel Alexander, may begin to see, wow, this is an El Dorado, a golden city for conservatives. This is not some kind of sellout to the left.
I've been a longtime member of Arizona Latino Republicans, even though I'm like barely Portuguese. I just was friends with all the people. So you can't go preaching at me about that. But, you know, my only observation is, you know, first of all, this guy's book sounds too good to be true, because if you're advocating for a path to citizenship and, you know, all this immigration reform, I don't see how I'm going to find it appealing, no matter how wonderful he is. And
No,
I,
no, no.
and
It's not how wonderful he is, and he is wonderful. It's how wonderful the vast 99.44% of the Latino undocumented immigrants who are prejudiced by a phony deal that was designed to let them in, but not actually prosecute them. They've been here, they've been working, they've been paying taxes, they've been a credit to the community, they've been a credit to the American economy. And frankly, I want more of them, not less of them, because I'm a patriot.
okay, then why don't you want more Africans? Everybody seems to want all the Central
Wait a
Americans,
second.
but we
Whoever
don't let
said,
anywhere near the percentage of Africans.
whoever said I don't want more Africans? Okay, I have a clear. I absolutely want more Africans in America. Okay, there are many. Like, we don't talk about European immigrants. Okay, we talk about a country by country. We talk about German, and by the way, Ben Franklin hated the German immigrants, thought we would never assimilate them, thought they would drag America down. And guess what? The largest plurality of immigrant ancestry in America now are the Germans, and they proved a credit. So have the Italians, so have the Jews, so have the Bohemians. Okay, I'm a third generation. My grandparents immigrated here, and yes, we need to get we need to be more generous. They came here because they wanted to become Americans. Let's help them become Americans, and that's true. I believe that very much for Nigerians, for Ghanaians, for Ethiopians, for Malians, and particularly for Somalians. Okay, the Somalians have moved into Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they are a fantastic credit to the community there. So my personal belief, being conservative, is we should let the states decide how many immigrants they want, give people permission, because a lot of states in the central part of America are hollowing out as everybody heads for the coasts. Okay, so there are a lot of
If you want to get into the nitty gritty of it, you know, okay, we let people in from Somalia because that's war torn, right? But what about people from, say, Kenya, where they're not undergoing war, but they're dirt poor? Our immigration policy would rather let in, you know, sort of poor people on the Mexican border instead of really poor people from Kenya. Do you see the
I don't believe we should be letting in people because they're poor. I believe that we should be letting in people because they're enterprising, because they aspire to our values, because they are religious, because they are patriotic. Okay, I believe I'm more of a Malcolm guy than a Dr. King guy, although I revere both of them. Okay, but in this particular case, let me quote Dr. King, because in his great heroic speech on the National Mall, he said, "We should judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin." So I believe that we would benefit. I'm selfish about this, Rachel. We would benefit by letting in more high character, great character people from all over the world into the middle of America. And I don't mean middle America, I mean geographical middle of America, that is hollowing out and has plenty of room for really great, high character, high productive people from all over the world. I think it would make America richer, and I can prove it.
Well, that's not what Biden is doing. If you look at how he's
that's where the bipartisan
Trump's Remain Mexico policy, we've had the highest rates of people coming over the Mexican border in 20 years, you know, ever recorded. I mean, it's astronomical. Biden only wants to let a lot of that one type of immigrant in.
The Bidenistas that's their platform. Okay, that's why we need a bipartisan bill, so we can be letting in more Africans and people from other places in the world, not just Latin America. Nothing against Latin Americans. Love them, want more of them, want millions more of them, want to make them. Look, there was a big fight between two guys you've actually heard of. and that was Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson said, we should let in all these people to populate America and make them citizens right away. And Alexander Hamilton said, no, we should make them wait 5 years. Okay. They were both to the right of Joe Biden. And we conservatives need to push the Republican Party and push Joe Biden to be more generous on immigration and more diverse on immigration than his team is willing to be. But we can do business with Joe Biden and create.
There's a big difference between then and now. It's called welfare. But we do need to move on, and that is our last topic, which is cutting off the 300-week pandemic unemployment aid and what we think about it. I'm just going to throw out my comments first on that. The couple things you need to know is that a lot of people are too afraid because of COVID and people saying how dangerous COVID is that they don't want to go back to work. So the Democrats are making this problem worse than they need to.
Look, I'm first of all, as I've admitted before, actually, it's not an admission, as I bragged before, I'm the only card-carrying, low serial number member of the vast right-wing conspiracy, former Reagan White House official, worked with the Trump White House, worked with the George W. Bush White House, worked with the Congress on getting conservative legislation passed, okay, who is also a member of the AFL-CIO, okay? I am a labor Republican. I jumped ship. I was born a Democrat. I was raised a Democrat. And Reagan, a former union leader as head of the Screen Actors Guild, and Jack Kemp, a former union leader as the head of the Players Association of the American Football League, attracted me into the Republican Party. I'm a labor Republican, okay? I'm appalled, $300 a week, okay, to keep people from having to either go at risk or to stick with low pay, dead end jobs. Hey, I want to see the Congress and the executive branch producing supply side legislation that will create such a demand for labor that it will push the wage rates up. I don't want a minimum wage, I want a maximum wage. I want a $15 an hour wage. I want a $25 an hour wage, but I don't want it legislated because that's like legislating the law of gravity. Prices are set by supply and demand. I want such a ferocious demand for labor that it's pushing the minimum wage up for unskilled, semi-skilled, and fully skilled labor, because I believe that with John F. Kennedy, who was a supply-side Democrat, a rising tide lifts all the boats.
Well, there are jobs being created. The problem is people are getting this unemployment pandemic relief that keeps going on and on and on, so they don't have any incentive to get a job. I just met a young 31-year-old man a couple days ago who has no job, just freeloads, and he basically told me that he walked into the Arizona Department of Economic Security, and within minutes, they gave him a food stamps card with $1,500 in it. How can you do that? How can you be an able-bodied man, 31 years old, and literally walk in and get that much money when there's like nothing making him get a job? Something is wrong with our society when you can do that.
Rachel, you are absolutely right. One of the things that supercharged the American economy under your good friend Bill Clinton was welfare reform. And the fact is, if you are paying people not to work, don't be surprised when they don't go to work. That said, I believe this is overblown. Those $300 a week, you can't live on $300 a week. It doesn't pay the rent, okay, is going to expire in September. Hey, it's June, July, August, okay? I don't believe the Republicans are doing themselves a credit by being mean-spirited.
Biden already said he's fine with the Republican governors ending that. Didn't you know that? Jen Psaki came out and said, oh, we're fine with the Republican governors ending that.
I understand that, but I just think that, I'm sorry, but I'm I'm on the side of Bob Cratchit more than Ebenezer Scrooge. Okay. And so you want to,
apples and oranges. Okay. Some 31-year-old guy who's completely able-bodied should be.
There are abuses. Okay. But there are also people who need a helping hand, to give them an additional 2.5 months.
I'm not referring to the people who need a helping hand. I'm referring to all the people who are completely able-bodied and they could go and get a job any day and they just don't want to because they know they've got the free handout.
I happen to know people who are eager to get back, and the minor handouts that they're getting is not what's holding them back. So, you know, if no system is ever perfect, if we're going to err on the safe side, I believe we should err. If we're going to err, I think we should lean toward generosity, both for ethical and political reasons. And we shouldn't be, you know, hippie punching. Yes, there are abusers, and yes, to the extent we can tighten up the system to filter out the abusers, I'm all for that. But don't indict the whole system. Don't take away the very, very minor relief payments that we're giving to people who actually need them, because there are some people who are abusing the system. Let's go after the people who are abusing the system. And we're generous people. And this is, and it's all, I mean Republicans are generous people. Don't let the left put us as a bunch of tight-fisted misers who are trying to take away, snatch crumbs from the table of the people who are in real need. Okay.
That's where we need to turn the debate around so they stop making us look like we are, you know, selfish and cruel and mean. And our side does a really poor job at, you know, explaining that. But we do need to wrap up, Ralph. Thanks to everyone for listening. And I'll give you guys a heads up right now. Next week, we're going to be discussing one of my articles, which is about Republican governors who insist on hiring Democrat PR firms, even though they're all about the cancel culture.
And we're going to be discussing my